Welcome to the Lyons Share, where we talk family, faith, football, finance, and fun. Today's episode, as always, brought to you by Mitch Lyons Wealth, your best game plan to protect, grow, and win retirement. Today's guest is a former MSU Spartan from Detroit Catholic Central in the great state of Michigan, and now the strength and conditioning coach at the Cincinnati Bearcats football program. I'd like to welcome to the show Niko Palazeti. Welcome, Niko.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate it. I know you're busy with the season, and you guys coming off a tough loss last week, and I know you got a bye this week, so time to kind of recalibrate and get ready for the final push, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, you know, tell us a little bit about, I mean, the path. Obviously, you played at state. Your career kind of ended with a neck injury, I believe, if I recall correctly, and you kind of gravitated to, you had some extra time on campus, and you kind of gravitated to the weight and conditioning because we had one of the best ever, in my opinion, at Michigan State with Ken Manny, who you got to, it was kind of your a mentor, I would assume, like most of the guys. Is that correct?
No, exactly. Yeah, I was a freshman in 2010, so I came in 2010. I played fullback, which was a miracle. I had the opportunity to play just because I think I might have been the person that killed that position. I don't think they offered another scholarship after that, so but I'll take it. And maybe God brought me there to do things other than play football. But um, absolutely love my time. Got to play for Coach Antonio, and just had a great experience. Injured my neck my redshirt junior season. In the middle of my redshirt junior season, uh, was able to try to come back that 2014 year, which would have been my true senior year.
Right.
Played halfway through camp, re-injured it, and then it was pretty much it. The writing was on the wall. Coach Antonio was a great enough man to let me make the decision myself, even though we all knew it was the inevitable truth. So I told him I was going to medically disqualify, but just wanted to provide value in some way. Really, just wanted to provide value, and so I asked him where I could do that, and he knew I was eager, and so he kind of just gave me the options of you could work here or here, and I said, Coach, I just want to be around the players, want to provide value in that regard, and walked into the weight room just real honestly, just to get a workout in. And Coach Manny was on a Kaiser bike, just on a bike working out, and he barks at me, he goes, "What are you doing?" I almost startles me, and I go, just came to talk and get a workout in, Coach. And he goes, "No, we got a group in 30 minutes. Check your locker." So I walked back in my locker, and he had actually put his coaching gear in my locker with a whistle. And yeah, it was an incredible gesture. And so I just kind of volunteered that year as an intern. And then once I graduated in the spring of 2014, went to become a graduate assistant. So I was GA there in strength and conditioning for 2014 season, and then midway through 2015, and then was able to get my first job there.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And then I know you bounced, I think, to a couple different schools before landing at Ohio State, which you had a nice 6 year run there. Won a few games. What was that like going to obviously a job's a job. It pays the paycheck, man. But obviously some big battles back in the day, Michigan State, Ohio State, and what was that like initially going to the enemy territory for a paycheck?
It was funny, on my interview. Yeah, Michigan State was the only team that was beating Ohio State in that time.
Yeah.
Because I was on the team that we won in 12
Yeah.
before
Down
no, we
there.
won in 11 before they got there.
Yeah.
We lost in 12, won in 14 in the Big Ten championship game. Oh no, that was 13.
13.
Won in
13,
13, lost in 14, won in 15. So like there was going back and forth. I
Yeah.
think the 16 game was in overtime. So
Yeah.
I got there. I interviewed in January of 17, and just that rivalry, that back and forth nature, really intrigued Coach Meyer. And I remember on my interview, half the questions was about Michigan State, the mentality, how they approached Ohio State, what that rivalry was like, what Coach Antonio was like, how he prepared. Literally, it was almost more of an insight into that program. And I remember just being grateful to have as much respect in that interview and respect coming into that program. And Coach Antonio and Michigan State program just was such a elite operated program and had so much respect and really carried such a weight. And if you were sparring, um, it really meant a lot. It really meant a lot and carried a lot of weight just because people assumed that you did it the right way. People assumed that you had the right value system. People assumed that you knew how to work and you knew how to operate and you were tough and gritty and you had a work ethic and you
Right.
meant something. And that definitely carried a lot of weight. So it was fun to kind of to gravitate to that, especially early on.
Yeah, and I would assume you brought a lot of that same thing. Cincinnati being a blue collar town, Midwestern town as well. I would assume your program kind of embodies those same traits: grit, toughness, work ethic. I'm sure I'm right in that assessment, right?
100%. And that's the beauty about Cincinnati is Cincinnati mirrors a lot of what makes Michigan State great. It's a lot of Midwestern blue collar tough kids
Yeah.
surrounded by a lot of guys with edge and grit, and it's a chippy group. It's a group that has something to prove every day. It's a to steal line from Coach Manny, chip on the shoulder mentality, and it's a great place to be. And everything that I learned at Michigan State and experience at Michigan State, you feel it here, and you feel it in the type of athletes you're around, the mentality that they have, and the desire to develop and grow. It's a really fun comparison.
I would think too, and I was talking with Mike Mularkey, three-time head coach, who was my tight end coach in Pittsburgh, and then he went on to be OC. He kind of moved up the ladder like they tend to do. But I told him I appreciated my time with him back in the day because he was the position coach. I got to spend a lot of time with him. That's the bulk of your time. That and strength and conditioning coach, right? Because so much of your time is spent in the weight room, off seasons and everything. So you're really able to develop that relationship, and that's how Coach Manny had such an impact on so many young men coming through Coach D's program. What is that like now? You're taking on that role and the kind of impact you can have on kids, and you're seeing them, at their best after a big win. You're seeing them after their lowest when they played maybe their worst game of their career, and yet they still got to come in and pound the iron. And what does that mean to you to have that kind of to be able to have that Ken Manny type effect on kids?
Well, that's the goal is to have that effect on kids because I think you know being around Coach Manny was such a fortunate thing, and you realize that it's the investment in the relationships that he formed that makes him such an elite level coach, and to be around that and to see how he would connect with the athletes and how I mean I'd rather walk into traffic than let that man down, and like it was just such an innate pressure and feeling to live up to his standard, and um, that was something that you realize that he instilled in you as a player, and then when you're as a coach, I remember almost having a saying of what would Ken Manny do? Like it was I would study him, like literally just
How many
study.
times a day do you catch yourself repeating stuff you heard him say over the years?
Oh my gosh, all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, literally all the time. Like I'm a pretty rigorous note taker, and I look back of all my journals, and there's so much instilled, and just earn the green jersey, earn the sea paw, earn. There's so many characteristics, chip on the shoulder
Yeah.
mentality, fist fight, just the grit, the toughness, the edge that you bring. It's a I call Coach Manny frequently and I ask for his advice and I ask for his guidance and his perception and how he views things and what matters to him because you never want to get too far away from that. And I think to your original question, strength and conditioning is a beautiful thing because you're around the athletes all the time. And yes, it's development, and yes, it's performance oriented, and yes, it's designed to maximize their genetic potential. And there's all those things, and that matters. But I think the bigger thing is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture their heart. You're trying to build relationships and trust. And if you can do that, the second piece will come inevitably. If you can capture their heart and you can build a relationship of trust, then they're going to be maximized because they'll do what you want them to do to the hardest ability possible. And I think that's really what the art of strength and conditioning is. That's what the art of coaching is. That's what the art of work is. It's can you capture their hearts through authentic relationships? And then from there, are you competent enough to actually maximize them? I think that's a challenge. It's formulating great relationships with care, and then also being as competent as possible to maximize their genetic potential or maximize them in their field, whatever it is.
Right. Now you're starting to, you're a good 10 years out of college now, just about, and you're starting to get up into that, older man, get off my lawn kind of ages. So what do you see a difference in the athlete today than what you remember even 10 years ago? Is there a difference?
You know, that's a funny question.
Every
Yeah, that's
generation
a
thinks the new generation is, not the same work ethic and all that. But do you feel that? Do you see that?
uh, that's a really interesting question. That's a really good question. I think there's a two responses to that. Yes, there's obviously going to be a difference. I think it's the way I think it's the way in which they experience the world, and I think it's the way in which society treats athletes versus the difference in the athlete themselves. And I remember Lorenzo Guest, who's now the strength coach with men's
Right.
basketball at Michigan State. He played football at Michigan State, and he gave me a piece of advice I'll always remember, and it was never forget what it feels like to be in their shoes, what it feels to be like to be an athlete, the stresses, the pressures, the anxieties, the the what it actually meant to be an athlete. Like I'm not old enough to not have been on social media when I was in college. I remember what it felt like to go back and check your phone and feel
Right.
like people disappointed in you or people not saying that you were as good as you thought you were or
Right.
there's all these different pressures and now you raise the stakes you add in on IL you add in a money value to what they perceive their worth to be you treat them like professionals and yet at the same time are they prepared enough and have the support systems to be that professional. It's an interesting world, but I think at the end of the day college football players are the same in regards to they want to be developed and they want to be pushed, they want to be challenged, and they want to have relationships. And I think that's the thing. Like you don't ever want to become cynical enough where you think that what worked with you and the genuine relationships that you form would change at all. And I think that's been the biggest thing and the biggest challenge for me is despite the changing landscape and what they're experiencing, the need for people that care and do things the right way is more important now more than ever.
Absolutely. And I said that jokingly, but I think, I'm 20 years ahead of you. And the thing is that you have to, if you want to keep up, I mean, you've got to be open to the fact that, hey man, change happens. You better keep up with it. Whether it's, social media or podcasts. I mean, they didn't have all this stuff. I waited to read the newspaper after my games, right? I mean, yeah, you couldn't just pick up the phone and read all about all the things you did wrong or great and be able to respond directly to people. And yeah, it's a totally different thing. And you raise a good point with NIL. I mean, how that has changed the landscape of college athletics, specifically football being the big revenue sport. What have you seen at Cincinnati in terms of, I don't know, maybe, just some of the positives, the negatives of it, I guess.
Once again, great question. Um, I think I think an athlete deserves to be compensated based on the amount of value they generate for the school, the value they generate for their brand, whatever you want to word it as. I think they deserve compensation. I think it complicates, and I would love to get your opinion on that, just with your background, both as a player, both as an administrator, both as how do you how do you how do you view that as a challenge from a school standpoint? Like viewing it from being a board member, like how do you view the challenges as a college and then as the NCAA as a whole? Like how do you forecast it adapting because it has to get better because it needs to get better and the product's too good. But how do you see the changes kind of realistically coming about?
Yeah, that is a $1 million question, right? And $1 billion question, because I'm all about capitalism. I mean, I think kids should get the value that they can create for whether it's companies they're representing or the school they're representing. But it's the wild, wild west out there. I mean, there's no real regulation behind it. They're supposed to be, but kids are getting contacted and they're being enticed, right? And the thing about it is, I've never liked the fact that a kid couldn't go and play someplace else. If the coach leaves, for example, the coaches can leave whenever they want, but a kid can't. My problem is man, you have more roster stability at the NFL level now than you do at college. I mean,
100%. Absolutely.
Michigan State, 60 new players this year. Well, as a fan, how do who's on my team this year? Like I have a hard time keeping up. And for me, it's kind of made me lose a little bit of interest, maybe from years gone by, because I knew exactly who that kid. Hey, that kid is a freshman. He's going to be good in a couple of years. He's going to work his way up. Well, now they're not even hanging around to work their way up because the grass is always greener, or somebody gives them 10,000 more dollars than what they. So it's tough, and I don't know what the answer is, and it's because as soon as you put a cap on it, now you're limiting people again, and so it's tough. And Pandora's box has been opened, so that's what I'm saying. The wild wild west is out there. Anything less than what they're accustomed to is going to be really tough to try to put that top back on the box. So if we figure that out, Niko, we're going to be very wealthy men. So
I I do think, because I think the product's too good, and I think it's too good to fail. But at the same time, you're right. Like, the lack of roster stability, it is frightening, and it is disheartening, and it's hard to each year to have the ability to build a culture. But then again, I do think, like, and this is what I keep telling myself, it's like the teams with the strongest culture and that can sustain that will have such a more competitive advantage. Like, even if you have a less talented roster, like, if you can if
right.
you can if you can find a way to maintain and have age and have maturity and have stability,
Well,
you can
yeah.
gain an edge.
It's like back in the day, right? The team that had the most fifth year seniors was pretty gonna be pretty solid, at the end of the day. But yeah, there's not too many teams that are having that fifth year. They might be a grad transfer fifth or sixth year guy, but it's not as much the guy that grew up in the program and paid his dues and worked his way up and earned his stripes. So yeah, it's an interesting time. And so with that said, with NIL, social media, the whole bit, and what do you find it? Do you find it more difficult to motivate kids? I mean, obviously they got the carrot out there. Kids, most kids come in and somewhere in that back of their head, they're dreaming of the NFL, right? At least at some measure. Some of them have their heads screwed on a little better than others in terms of having a plan B. But do you find it harder to motivate kids now that they already have some money in their pockets and maybe they're not under the same? I went to school, I needed the scholarship because I wouldn't have been going to Michigan State otherwise.
Yeah.
I didn't, that was a big carrot for me to work my tail off and try to get to that level. Do you see any lesser motivation from kids because they already have some of that the greenbacks coming their way?
I think emotional intelligence and being hypersensitive to just the team dynamic is more important now than ever. I think program alignment and communication is that much more important, because I think I think for the most part, um, no, like, at least for us, I think, we came in 2023, and the program had success, record success. Um, but a lot of the players that were the reasons behind that success had left, and now you bring in a new coaching style, a new staff, um, different type of players are stepping up. It wasn't new conference. It was all these different dynamics, and obviously in 2023 we went 3-9, so we weren't very good. And I think understanding of what we believed in as a culture and what we wanted to be our program, and having players that believed in the same thing was absolutely important. And I think that's where the roster overhaul. I mean, we overhauled our entire roster, and we brought in a bunch of new players, and we were able to kind of, unfortunately, remove players that either weren't probably talented enough to play at the Big 12 level or just weren't the right fit culturally. And so you have all these things that change in the roster. And then it's okay, how are we going to build it the right way, and how we're going to bring in players that believe in what we believe in. I think transparency was really important. I think being completely honest, and then driving a culture-based program.
Yeah.
Luckily, I had great mentorship in that. But then again, motivations change, and it's hard, and you have to be very dynamic and really build that infrastructure deep. And we did it for the past year, and leadership councils really matter. Sports psychologists matter. Having a great communication line with the head coach and having all the departments communicating really matters. And just being understanding the motivation of the players, what they're experiencing, and then having the trust in relationships so you can kind of be proactive in potential issues. But I
And
think,
you have to be adaptable, right? As a
I,
coach, as a
oh my
program,
God,
because the game has changed, right? You're not
yeah,
bringing this kid in to nurture him for 5 years because, more than likely, the odds are against that, so to be able to, more, have X amount of kids come in and try to get them to beat to the, step to the right drum, or, same drummer as everybody else. That's tough. So the game's changed, bottom line. And you see some guys that maybe don't want to go down and play that game anymore, not that I've talked to Nick Saban, but I have a feeling Nick Saban, probably the NIL probably killed his desire a little bit. This culture now of the, pay me or I'm leaving. I don't think that maybe sat well with him. And honestly, I'm really surprised that Tom Izzo has lasted as long as he has too, as MSU hoops coach. But just because they're kind of cut from the same cloth a little bit.
But like to your point, like the ability to grow and the ability to adapt, like it's more important now more than ever. Like you can
Yeah.
either drag your feet in or embrace it. And like I think it's also interesting, like you got to stay true to your value system, but at the same time be able to adapt. So it's a fine balance. And it is frustrating. And it can be frustrating and it can be depressing. And a lot of times the changes happen for an idealistic way, but that like you take the portal and NIL and release both those animals at the same time, like
Yeah.
it's just going to become pay for play, which is exactly what it was, which wasn't the intent. But at the same time, like how do you build up a program that's based on the right things? I mean, that's a challenge, but like you have to be able to adapt. I think you're right, 100%. Adaptability is probably the most important thing in college football right now.
Yeah. So, just changing gears a little bit, what in 10 years since you've been training as an athlete, how much has it changed just the science behind the training, and even that decade?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot, a lot. I think number one is just obviously the role of sports science has tremendously increased. So your ability to understand what you're exposing the athletes to and then what they need to be ready for. So understanding the external load, if you will, understanding what the physiological demands are and then helping to prepare them for it. It just makes it coaches have always done a great job of it, but now it's objective. You have the data. And then
Yeah.
everything else off of that is just um is just you know it's still training. And I think the guy the man I worked for at Ohio State, Mickey Marotti, who's another legend like Coach Manny, and they actually had worked together in the past, so they have a great relationship, and they're very similar in that regard. But I got to see him once again to build off the theme of adapt, and it was you have all these technologies, right? Like you have all these different different types of modes that you can change. And I think watching him kind of process through that, and the way I always viewed him was he would stay true to who he was and then view the tool as a way to enhance it instead of changing his own identity to
Right.
meet the needs of what that technology told him. And I think a lot of times coaches get lost in that. Like they get a new technology and it changes who they are and it changes with their belief system and who they are as a programmer or as a coach. And now all of a sudden they don't stand on anything. And I think you always have to search for what's great, but then make it work to fit your needs and fit your system.
All right, that's good. So let's give the listeners here a taste, I guess, of what's I have a good idea with in terms of the position coaches and football coaches in general, but what are the hours? What's the weekly lifestyle for the strength and conditioning guy? Because obviously, I mean, you're out at practice and stuff too, but you're
Yeah.
not necessarily coaching and doing your strength stuff out there. But well, some extent, you are probably stretching and all that kind of stuff. But what's the average week look like for you when you're in season?
That's a great question. In season, so let's just take a Tuesday, the busiest day of the week. So Tuesday, um, we have groups. So we'll have a 6:30 non-travel developmental lift group. Um, and so we'll be in at 5:30. Usually we train before that. So we as a staff, so we'll lift and just swallow the
Go
frog and
hard.
get it over. Yeah, we'll get it over with. We'll knock that out. I'll try to live our own value system. So that'll be at 6:30, and then we call it barbershop style, but we'll have open hours. And so we'll be from basically about 8 to 9 o'clock, and then we take a little bit of a break, a lunch break, and then we go from 11 to noon. And so during that time frame, if you're a travel player, you can lift on Tuesday or Wednesday. And so we have guys will flow in, and then we train kind of in that time slot as guys rotate through. Each coach is assigned to a player. From there, meetings, just making sure you're aligned from a practice script standpoint, making sure everyone's on the same page. Departmentally, athletic training, nutrition, sports science, sports psychology, strength and conditioning. Then with the position coaches and all that. So making sure we're all aligned. Meetings will start. So we'll have lunch. So lunch will be pretty much from 11 to 1:30. At 1:30, everyone's got to be in. 2 o'clock, team meeting. After that, they go right to position meeting or special teams meeting, then position meeting. Usually right around 2:45. Horn will be out of practice, and practice will usually go from about uh, 1:30. So 2:45 will usually be the start of practice, and then we're usually off the field around 5 o'clock. And then after that, cold tubs recovery, treatment, dinner, and then you're usually rolling out around 7 o'clock. Then you do it all over again.
Long day.
Yeah, it
Long
is.
day, and you are a family man. So how does that impact mama and kids when Dad's gone a lot during the season like that.
This is a great Coach Manny story. I'm glad you brought this up. So, Coach Manny, as you know, embodied presence. Like that man carried a presence with him. Was a
Oh yeah.
weight. When you're around him, you could feel this aura. And I'll
He
never
was
forget
intimidating
this.
to me, and I never even had him as a coach. I wish I had. He was a few years after I left state, and I always wish I had told him. I wish I'd have had the opportunity to train with him, But he did. He exuded that just presence.
Yeah,
You called it right.
100%. And so he always had the same routine. And we talk about a routine based man. That man was, and he always had a routine. He'd always, 6:30, whatever. He would walk out, say goodbye to us at the front desk, the GAs and the interns. He would shower and then go out the back door. So I never see him after he showered. So he says goodbye, gives us a little grief, walks out. Well, he must have forgotten his bag or something. He walks back in about 20 minutes later and he's wearing like blue jeans, like penny loafers, like a white t-shirt with like a leather coat. And I almost stop him. I almost like, sir, excuse me, stop. Like, who are you? And
Who's
I
this
look,
guy?
I'm like, holy crap. Like his whole demeanor was different, the whole way he carried himself. Like he left Coach Manny, he came back Can Manny. And
Damn it.
it was just a really interesting
Yeah.
trigger for me of like, as much as you need to be able to bring that energy in to work, you also have to be able to turn it off and
Oh yeah.
be the husband and the father and that other side of your personality. And
Yeah.
and that was such a, I mean, I was probably 22 when I saw that. And that's always stuck with me, which is, do you have the discipline to turn it off and be as attentive and as disciplined as a husband and father and fulfill that role with the same energy and the same discipline as you do as a coach? And that was a learning factor for me for sure.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's better to learn it early than late or too late. So that's awesome, man. Well, listen, I wish you nothing but the best with the rest of the season for you guys, and I really appreciate you coming on, Nico, and just kind of giving us a taste of what your journey's been, what the impact Coach Manny had on you, Coach D, the program there, and how you've been able to take that forward and impart those same life skills with the kids you're working with daily, and I appreciate it, and just love having you on, and wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm humbled for the opportunity. I hope to get on again soon, man. I appreciate you a lot. Thank
Sounds
you very
good.
much.
As always, this episode brought to you by Mitch Lyons Wealth, your best game plan to protect, grow, and win retirement. And until next time, we'll see you.